start a new part, and I'll tell it to do a metric part. And this time I'm going to start out on the top plane, and so I will go to the top view on the glass cube, and I'll start a new sketch, and I'm going to do a 2D sketch, or 2D center point rectangle. I'll go ahead and put in the dimensions, let's say 200 that way, and I'll hit tab 100 this way. It all turns dark, it's fully constrained. And then I like to rotate around a little bit before I do my extrusion, so I'll rotate around, and I'm going to drag this arrow and go down instead of up, and let's say I'm going to extrude that a distance of 50. And I'll do a new sketch on this face. Now I have a choice. I can either do my sketch on this face, or I can do it on the XZ plane, or the top plane. Let's turn on that origin center point. We like to keep that visible. You create more robust parts when you create your sketches on these origin planes rather than creating your sketches on these faces. So whenever possible, I don't sketch on a part face. Using these origin planes is called using the Born technique, B-O-R-N, where it stands for base, orphan, reference node. And so I use that Born technique whenever possible. So I'm going to start a new sketch on that work plane rather than on the origin plane, rather than on the part face. And I'm going to project geometry, and I'm going to project this entire face. Now normally I project the individual edges, but I'll go ahead and I'll click on that face, and it projects the edges of that face. I'm going to offset that, and I'll offset that in a certain distance, and then I'm going to dimension that distance, whatever I want. Okay, let's see. I think what I will do is then I'm going to change these lines on the outside to construction, and I only need to change one of them to construction. So I'll get out of the dimension command, and I'll change one of those to construction, and then I'll do an extrusion. And by changing that to the construction, I don't get this area in between in that projection, and I'll just get this area. And I'm going to tell it I want to extrude that all the way through the part. So I'm going to say through all, but I want to, right now it's on cut, so this is join, and join is green. Or it will give you, if I bring this out here, it gives you a green result. Cut is red. And I'm going to tell it to do intersection, and let me flip that direction, and I'll tell it to go through all. Okay, so if I go ahead and accept that, it's going to cut away everything on the outside of that. But let's click on the More tab, and let's put an angle on here, let's say of a 60-degree taper. And when I do that, in effect, I'm putting a chamfer on these edges, which I could have done it as a chamfer, but I just wanted to show you the intersection command, which few people use that intersection, and later I'll show you some other ways of using that intersection. Alright, let's come up here, and I'm going to change this to a wood material. Now be careful, because there are wood textures, and then there are wood materials. A texture is, just think of like painting it. It's not actually giving it the material property. And so if you want the material property, you have to come over here and select the material, and then it gave it that texture of appropriate for that wood. I'm going to create a plane above this part, and I'm going to turn on the visibility so you can clearly see what I'm doing. So I turn on the visibility of that XZ plane, and I'll come up here and I'll click on plane. I'm going to click and drag and offset this plane. Now for what I'm doing, I don't really care what the distance is, but I'll go ahead and put in 25, and I'll say OK to that. I'm going to hide this origin plane that I can right click and turn the visibility on and off. So I have this plane that's 25 millimeters, and the distance, this distance doesn't really matter. But notice on this plane that there's a lighter color side, and then this side is a dark, this is a blue color, and then this is kind of a red-orange color. So this is a lighter color and a darker color. So when you create a work plane, it has a front side and a back side. The front side is the lighter color, the back side is the darker color. Alright, I'm going to start a new sketch on this plane now, and I'm going to type in some text. So I'll get a text box here, and I'll go ahead and type in my text, and let's type in, so I'm going to put in a little bit of logo type text in here. Right, and I think I'll highlight that, and I'll make this text larger, so let's make that 15, and I'll go ahead and say OK to that. Now I see that it's upside down relative to the way I'm looking at this on the top view, and so I'm going to go ahead and put a dimension on this, and I can drag this around, and we can see that here's that text box that I originally started with. I'm going to put a dimension on either the vertical or the horizontal edge of the text box, and it doesn't matter which one. So I put one dimension on there, and when I do that, after I dimension it, I can drag around. Let me get out of the dimension command. I can drag around one of these endpoints and get this text box to whatever orientation that I want. So one of the questions that comes up quite a bit is somebody wants to know how they can get text at some kind of angle, because if I double click on this dimension and I come in here, and there isn't the option of to get the text at an angle that you want, but you can just put that box, and now I can put a horizontal or a vertical relation on that text box, and now that text will stay horizontal, and you can go in and put whatever other dimensions that you want for locating that text. Now let's say that I was making a rubber stamp, so I'm going to do an emboss of this as raised lettering on here for some kind of stamp. But in that case, I need a mirror image of this text. And so in order to get that, that's why I offset this work plane up here, because I can't change the origin planes. That's that Bourne technique, base orphan reference node. You can't make any changes to those, but I can make this change to this offset work plane. So I'm going to right click on that offset work plane, and I'm going to tell it to flip normal. Remember, we said there was a front side and a back side. So when I flip normal, it now changed this to the back side of the text, or the work plane, and now this is the front side. And so now my text is flipped around. So now if I want to do that emboss, I can select that text, and okay, so I'll select that face that I want this text on. I'll tell it 1 millimeter high, and if I want to change the color of that text, I could click on this color swatch and pick some other color, whatever that I want. And when I say OK, we see that color swatch now, and I'll go ahead and say OK to that, and I emboss that. I can turn off the visibility of that work plane, and so now when I stamp that, it will be right reading when I use this stamp to stamp my ink onto whatever I'm trying to imprint.